here. And I hope this time will be as valuable for you as possible. And feel free to just ask any questions along the way, interrupt me, whatever. And I hope this is valuable for everyone else as well. Do you have any ability to play today, or are we just going to
Yeah,
take it?
I do. I have my marimba here.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Fantastic. All right. So you played rotation one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Hopefully you saw the sheet that I left you some comments. We can go through that a little bit if you want to try and deal with a few things. Does that sound like a good place to start?
Yeah.
Okay, great, great, awesome. So a lot of what I had to say under the general technique category, I think had to do with sort of depth of sound,
Okay.
right? And your overall quality of sound. So while I thought it was very, very good, I thought there were some things that we could do to improve it even more. Okay. Um, and so, I think it really kind of all starts with, and you played Steven's script, right? I think I have that right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So this is true of all grips, but of especially with Steven's grip, is that it requires a good amount of strength to really get the best kind of sound that you can. Strengthen the hands. If you think about these grip mallets here, if you think about um, the way Steven's grip works, right? We hold the outside mallet in the back of the hand, right? Anchored primarily by these two fingers. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Shruti doesn't do Steven script. She does
Oh, I'm
like
so sorry.
she does a
Okay,
cross. She does cross script.
great. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you. I didn't notate that on my sheet, so thank you for that clarity before because I could talk a lot about that, obviously. All right, thanks, Tim. Okay, so with any cross grip, then, which is it actually started with traditional grip when I first got to study with Gordon Stout, and so I do have a little bit of experience with that. Um, I think what we want to look at with you, Sruthi, is just a lower stroke angle. Okay, when I watch you play, we're a little too high off the keyboard. So if we can find a way, what I see from you is like this kind of stroke angle, very consistently, right? What we really want to try to do is bring this as flat down to the keyboard as possible. In fact, I would rather hear some stick clicking from rim shots, so to speak, every once in a while. And if you watch me play, I think you'll notice that I play, it looks like my mallet should be contacting the shaft of the stick, should be actually hitting the marimba bars. That's how flat my stroke is, okay? So I think that'll go a long way, regardless of grip, to increasing the quality of your sound. So maybe we could just try, because I noticed that your right hand seemed higher than the left hand in this way. Okay. So, and I know sometimes we go to the tip of the mallets, right? Because there's a little more fuzz at the very top, right? And so maybe, I don't know why you were doing that. Was that the reason why you were doing that? Or is this like a little idiosyncrasy in your technique?
I think it was just for my one-handed rolls. It was a bit
Ah,
easier. I had more of an angle, but
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second, the one-handed roll thing. Can we just play a little bit of the beginning?
yeah.
We'll see how this works over Zoom. And maybe it's hard to see. Well, we can actually see your stroke angle here pretty well. So let's just play a little bit of the beginning and let's get that stroke angle as low as possible. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Ruthie. I think we probably have some audio setting on. It's okay for now because it's a little hard to hear your audio when you're playing. But yeah, that's a little bit better. And this maybe looks more natural, this piece, because your sort of hands are separate this way, right? But consider trying to get that right hand even just as flat as you can, right? Because whenever we have this kind of stroke angle, that's going to give us the best sound possible. Okay. Okay, great. Any questions on that?
No.
Good. The next thing I wanted to address with you really quickly is, and it was hard to hear you there with your Zoom audio, but on the recording, take a listen back and just listen to the evenness of stroke from note to note, hand to hand. Okay, there's a lot of patterns in all of these pieces, and actually, what's interesting about this particular piece, I was very fortunate enough to be in the room when Eric Samut actually premiered these pieces for the very first time way back in 1995. And it was one of the early first examples, and maybe the first example for me personally, that I heard sort of a new kind of composition and writing for the instrument, right? Where there's lots of sustain but no rolls, right? So meaning that what Eric did in his compositions here was he found a way to create as much sustain as possible with patterns, right? Lots of the same kind of patterns between the hands. And that really, I always make a joke about this because it seems like a lot of other composers sort of catched on to this idea, and they somehow all got together at some point around that time period and decided they weren't ever going to write rolls in their music ever again. And that it was just going to be, it was just going to turn into ultimately, let's find a way to play patterns and patterns and patterns to create sustain, right? And so that's really interesting. And because I think, and you didn't actually fall into this trap too much, which is really, really great. But I think sometimes when we play this music, we don't think about the sustain. And so all we hear is the actual rhythm and the tick of the sticks, right? And so the shift then focuses from it should sound very linear, right? But sometimes when we hear people play this music, it just sounds like paka, 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 and we lose that sort of longer line, right? And so I think you're doing a pretty good job of that. But with the what I'm hearing in your recording, if you go back and listen to some unevenness of stroke, okay? And when we're doing a lot of these patterns together, that's very common. So the easiest way for me that I found to fix it is to take the resonators off the instrument and try playing for a while without them. And it's not the most fun experience, right? But it's very similar to practicing into like a really dead practice room sonic, sort of with very dry practice room environment, right? It's very similar to that, where you can really hear a lot of those little idiosyncrasies, okay? So that would be a next step for you technically, just to get some of these patterns, right? As they shift from one pattern to the other, it's very common for strokes to be a little bit uneven, okay? All right, great. Any questions on that?
No.
So let's talk about one-handed roll, since we're kind of just talking about technical stuff here. Yeah, I don't really play, and actually one of the reasons I left cross grip was because I wanted to play one-handed rolls, okay? So that was a long time ago, and I think I see a lot of cross players now who do a pretty good job of it, right? So I think what you really need is some exercises. Do you have an exercise that you use to work on this?
Yeah.
Okay, can you show me what that is real quick?
Yeah.
And even if we can't really hear it really well, I can at least kind of see what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so are you changing intervals, it sounds like, in there? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that's a good exercise. Usually, I would say what I would rather you focus on rather than changing intervals, because that's kind of less common, right? You're rolling in octaves most of the time, I would think, right? Especially in this solo, right? So that's not a bad exercise by any means. But what I would encourage you to do, and the one that I play, and I'm gonna just try this. You can let me know if this is really too loud, but I'll show you it over behind the instrument. For me, it's really about strengthening, right? Getting the control and the strength that I need. So the exercise I use sort of does both, right? It sort of works a lot on creating, oops, as I drop mallets everywhere, creating as much strength as possible, okay? And really, it's a little bit like a workout, right? You go to the gym, you work out, and you strengthen whatever muscles you're working on. You've got to get them to the point where they really get tired, right?
Yeah.
And that's how they get stronger, right? So the exercise I use is just this one right here. from C to octave C up, and then all the way back down chromatically. And if I can do that, you know, at that tempo, pretty clean, all the way up and down, then I'm pretty strong. Does that make sense? So I think that's really what the next step for you on the one-handed roll thing is, just getting stronger to control that. Because not only does strength increase our volume and our power as we play, but more importantly, or maybe even just as importantly, is that it helps the finite motor control, right? Being able to do this in a more Eric Sammut sort of lighter sort of way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you want to have the same control from a flatter stroke that you do on an upper, you know, so you can do both, right? So when you want a little more power from a roll, you can kind of get your stroke angle back down. And if you want to relax more and get a lighter sound, you can kind of come up. And this is where the finite motor control might really help too, right? And really, because this music, we haven't talked about the style yet, but this music obviously is very light. So you might need that finite sort of motor control that you gain there. Great. Yeah, and the only other thing I would say in regards to more technique stuff, because we should probably move on, just when we talk about overall sound control and tone control and the quality of our sound, for me it's really about manipulating relaxation, right? In any kind of role, in a piece like this where there's lots of sustain, I want to minimize attack as much as possible. It's one of the reasons that my mallets have much softer yarn on them. In this kind of situation, you know, I don't really want too much attack. Okay, if we think about the way most other musicians operate, they have multiple articulations they can make. They can go da versus ta, right? And so if I relax and slow my stroke down, then I get and I have a mallet with a softer yarn on it, I get a much more sort of gentle attack. And then it's also the opposite. If I want a little more articulation, then I squeeze a little bit more and move a little faster, right? But if we're not really as relaxed as we can, and when we make most of our sounds, or if we never learn to really play relaxed, then that difference between those two things is harder to sort of hear.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, let's talk a little bit about musicality. I thought the style was really good. When we play soft on marimba, we have actually this amazing ability to do that, actually. When you think about playing very soft on marimba, it's much easier to do that than, say, a flute playing pianissimo or a clarinet playing pianissimo, right? So, and especially in this music, we can take advantage of that sort of low end. But it's very difficult, the softer we play, not to have our sound thin out, right? So again, we're getting back to the strengthening issue here, right? Of being really much stronger in the hand, so I can get that kind of lighter sound, but also a pianissimo sound, right? And the control. And I think sometimes you make a great sound and then the next note is a little less on the intensity, right? Or the angle's a little off, or maybe this playing spot's a little off, and then the clarity of that sound isn't quite there from a sound depth wise. Okay. Let's see, I'm going through your comments here as we're doing this. Yeah. So I made a note about phrasing. So, you know, the thing about have you ever watched Eric Sammut play at all?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, there's not a lot of videos, at least the last time I checked, it's been a little while, but there has to be some things out there. So, and that's always important, right? To kind of see, you know, especially these days, I wasn't used to this when I was your age, that I could just go online and find, you know, as much playing as, you know, as what you can find these days. But, you know, Eric's playing is so light. I mean, I remember watching him like it was yesterday back then in 1995. And we were all just simply amazed at how much control he had. And also the dynamic range that he had, even though we never would say he played really loud, right? So he found this way to have this incredible tessitura of expression and dynamics within this amount of space, it felt like, right? So feel free. This is very expressive music. It's never like over the top loud or aggressive, but it's full of nuance and expression in that way. Okay, I think we're closing down here. All right. Good. I I think we just need to do on the form side of things, right? Your communication was pretty good, but we need to grow more into our intensity in measure 22, and work to build more to that point. I'm not looking at the score right now, but usually these pieces have one big moment that we've been kind of gunning for from the very beginning, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can to get there in the most, successful way possible for the listener. Right? I think this is that bum 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 bum. Right? It's a beautiful moment, right? So just try and do what you can to build a little bit more to that, and then just settle into that in a more successful way, stage presence wise. So we're with you there. All right. And then make more of the ending.
Okay.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's got a really fun ending to it. So, yeah, I hope all that helps. We talked about some technique stuff, some interpretation stuff. I think you're doing some really good work, and hopefully all of this sort of helps you take, some things to the next level. Do you have any questions for me before we close out?
I don't think I have any, but thank you for
Great.
the feedback and everything.
Yeah. Well, thanks for playing, and it was a really pleasure to hear you play. I hope I get to hear you again sometime.
Shruti, thank you so much for also being able to participate in the class on short notice. So I actually was talking with her last night at 9 o'clock. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
but I'm so glad she was able to participate. Okay, we're going to now switch over to Jonathan Yee. So, Jonathan, if you want to
Jonathan.
join us, there you go.
Hello.
All right, Jonathan's back.
And Jonathan is our third place Marimba High School Division winner.
Great. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Mr. Burritt.
All right. Well, listen, to get things started with you, I have to say that I was blown away by, I've heard very few high school students attempt to play this solo. So the fact that you played it as well as you did, and, really pushed yourself. I assume this was maybe the hardest thing you've played. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been playing or practicing it for a while. Yeah, really working on it.
Yeah, that's great, and I love that. I love that you were obviously really into playing the piece, right? And wanted to play it really bad, and
Yes, sir.
because that's great. So, congratulations on just the feat of learning all those notes and playing it as well as you did. It was
Thank you.
really great job. Okay, let's go through a couple things here. So I wanted to talk to you just on a technical aspect. These pieces, one of the many reasons these pieces are so difficult because they're so dense and thick, right? There's just a lot of notes, but what we have to remember is we need to ask ourselves, what are the functions, right? Or what are the function of all of these notes, okay? And so the number one problem I hear with most performances of this particular piece and pieces like this is that there's not enough delineation or separation, okay, between this texture. And I love this about solo marimba. It's what made me fall in love with, or one of the things that made me fall in love with the instrument. I was very fortunate growing up to have my mother was a piano teacher, and I think she had dreams of me being a solo pianist. And that didn't work out. But the marimba was a very close cousin to that, right? And I think in this way specifically, in that I could play more than one note at a time, right? And if you think about all your friends in band, right, none of them really can play more than one note at one time, right?
Yeah.
And you can play 4 at one time, right? Okay.
Yes.
So with that, so that's really awesome. First of all, right? That realization. I know that sounds kind of like a duh. Well, that makes sense. Of course, that's right. But if we really think about what that means, we have a little bit more responsibility, and because in this piece you've got bass line, you've got the accompaniment notes, right?
Yes, sir.
Accompaniment / harmonic notes, and then you have the melodic notes, right? And it's your responsibility to sort of keep control and to watch that voicing. And so you did a good job in this way. But the problem with this piece is these inner notes can really overtake the melodic notes and the bass notes if we're not careful, right? So I want you to really experiment. I don't know if you're going to keep playing this. You should, because you play it so well. But I would love for you to experiment more on just creating that texture. So we always need to hear the bass line. That's, the bass line, that low bass note really needs to be, prominent so we can hear everything that comes after. All right. I think, were you listening a little bit to our discussion with Shruti about Samut's music?
Which parts?
I was talking with Shruti about how composers who play marimba have this unique way of writing for the instrument, right? That creates all this sustain, right, without actually rolling. Okay, so this is another great example of that, and it's maybe even a further developed example of that than what Eric Samut was doing when he wrote the rotations, meaning that there's all of these all these patterns in the left hand, right, and the melodic stuff going on here, and so the danger is essentially that if we play those inner notes too loud, then we can't really hear. If every note of this three voice texture has a similar sort of intensity to it, then it just sounds like bigga all the time, right? And so I think the biggest thing you could do is just bring back all those busy notes in the middle of the texture, right? Because they're just harmonic, they're just sustain, right? And so lower to those, less attack, okay, if possible, and softer volume, and think of them not as rhythms actually, but actually just as a way of creating sonority, sustain, resonance. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So lower stick height is the key. I talk about this all the time. Okay. Have you ever listened to Bob Becker play? Do you know who that is? Have you ever heard
No.
of Bob Becker? Yeah. Okay. Great. So go look him up and watch as many videos and listen to as much of his playing as you can. He's a member of the very famous Nexus Percussion Ensemble, and probably the greatest percussionist alive, or one of the greatest percussionists alive. One of the best, probably the greatest xylophonist alive. And I've learned so much from just watching him and listening to him play. He makes so much sound for so little stick height. Okay, and what that does is not only do we hit more correct notes, but we also hit more spots on each note correctly. Okay, so there's less attack, there's more sound, there's more consistency note to note when we're being very careful about hitting the right spots on the note. So I think that's a really crash course on this thing I talk about so much, which is just the lower we can play, the better. All right, and we find volume from some other way than just a quick, high, fast stroke. Okay, and you don't really play obnoxiously high or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But I think, especially as busy as this piece is, with as many notes at this tempo you have to play, right? Efficiency is also something that would help you there, right? So go watch Bob Becker play, and I think you'll see what I'm getting at. The lower the height that you play at, for sure will help you in this. Okay. So because the issue, one of the things I noted on your sheet, and this is I've had many students play this piece, and it's always just so difficult to be accurate, right? When there's just so much going on. And so that's the number one thing you can do to improve your accuracy, is to just play from the lowest height possible. Okay. And then of course, I don't know how you practice, but more slow practice, right? Just to make sure that we can be a little bit more accurate on how crazy hard this is. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about some musicality. We talked about the balance, right, between all of the three parts of the texture: the bass line, the harmonic line, and the melodic line. It's a little hard sometimes to hear the linear aspects of this. This is a very tonal piece of music, right? If you might think of Chopin as the classical composer that maybe influenced this type of style that Chung wrote, right? So you should go listen to Chopin. It's incredibly lyrical, right? Everything it hovers. All tonal music really exists, I think, most successfully in a linear fashion, right? And you think about the challenge of how hard that is, right? When we're just going crazy here. So that's the real challenge, right? And so that's what these notes are really referring to, right? Very difficult to keep the piece lyric. Lyric, as a result of that phrasing, can be disjunct. So work to group several phrases together. So it's just a matter of like playing from a low stick height, knowing where the peak of a phrase is, and going to that moment, and then coming more to the back end of it, and then starting again. If the score is full of these really long phrase markings, right? And so we just need to do as much as we can to make sure we're hearing those larger pulses in the music when all I see is so much verticalness. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's see. All right. I really loved the drama. Okay, the way that you played this was very visual. It was very appropriate stylistically, physically. So that's really great to see. And you were doing a lot to really bring as much of that sort of romantic quality to the instrument or to the performance, which I really, really appreciate. If we could find a way to keep doing that successfully, but be more accurate at the same time, then we really have something special, right? And the problem, right, with this fully embracing the expression part, where we're moving a lot, right, where we're physically very intense with the performance, is that's when our accuracy can sometimes sort of struggle a little bit, right? That's like such a hard balance of, and for me, I'd rather have a few wrong notes than a really cold, perfect performance, right? Where there's not as much physical expression involved. So I think just continue to develop the musical side, which will come through better when we get this texture sort of figured out. You do have a marimba there, is that right?
Yes, sir. It's 4.3.
Is there any spot of this that you can play on that range?
Probably
Not, huh?
it's hard to find.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay if not. I just wanted to make sure that we tried that if it was possible, but if it's not, it's no problem. Okay. Yeah, and then so I think the last thing I said in the overall effect part was just keep working up, keep working to open up the physical expression in your body and facial area. I think I hear a lot of good musical ideas, but I don't always see them from the rest of your body, if that makes sense, right? When we think of the great musicians that we listen to, and they don't even have to be classical musicians, right? They're sort of one with the instrument, right? You can see the expression of the music in their face, right? And in their entire being, right? And so, it's great that we're even having this discussion as young as you are, because this is always a work in progress for every student I work with, regardless almost, of age. So just continue to find ways to connect what you're doing musically and let your body sort of fall more in line with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I relate. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, watch a lot of other musicians play, watch violinists play, especially romantic music, just to draw parallels to the style that you're trying to recreate here with this piece, So you're halfway there, because I can hear a lot of these lines in your in the musicality of your actual playing, right? It's just a matter of connecting that to the rest of your body, okay? Because that part is so important. And you think about the instrument being such a large instrument, right? Not being able to actually touch it like most other horn players can, right? Or string players can. As actively physical as it is, it's important in all of those situations, of course, but even more so probably with being behind the instrument, that everything we're doing, and this is a big thing for me as I'm teach more and what I try to do in my own playing, is not taking advantage of the physical, visual aspects of it to draw away from the music, right? But actually making sure that they are always in line with the style of the music, because that's what really helps a listener sort of connect to what you're doing more and more. Okay, so one of my things that maybe would help with this, that I talk about all the time with my students, so I call my 6 M's concept, and I'll probably bring this up multiple times today. Make a musical motion that matches the musical moment. So make a musical motion that matches the musical moment. Okay? So if that's a prep before I even start playing, it would be like, for this piece, it might be, the start soft, right? So, boom, right? I already know before I even make a sound what's happening, what's about to happen, right? And the audience will see that and they're like, oh, I already know what's coming, and then they hear it and it's like, ah, okay, right? Rather than just sort of dropping the sticks and going, right? And not having a physical prep to that works, okay? There's so much there's so much lyricalness to the melody here, right? If my motions are like this all of the time, that's not the 6M concept, right? That's a musical motion that doesn't match the musical moment, right? Because those motions are too quick. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a way of addressing this issue with sort of a funny saying of, here's how you should attack these notes, right? So if I'm playing something more lyrical, then I need to be using this kind of motion, right? But it's eventually what I try to work on with my students, and this is the part of us I think will help you sort of inhabitate these motions more here in the rest of your body, is that I'm hearing, in my head, I'm singing it in a way that's so connected and lyrical. Right? So in my head, it's not right? It's bum 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 yum yum dum dum da da da. And so I'm going way on a limb here, right? Making a fool of myself, maybe singing like this. But that's what's going on in my head, right? Is that there's just so much connection in the way that I'm singing it that how could I not use motions that sort of match that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's exactly what my piano teacher does.
Oh, great. That's good. And it's so good that you have a piano teacher. That's amazing. That will always be super helpful to you. Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, I think there's so much we can learn from pianists, and they're ahead of us on the pedagogical sort of circle, right? They've been around a lot longer than we have. So, yeah, again, congratulations on a really amazing performance. And, I think once we can get this accuracy thing sort of just better focused in those, where all those spots are in the piece.
Yeah.
Right. And then really connecting more musically to what's happening physically. I think that's really where the magic is for you moving forward.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
I do have one. I don't know how long it will take. So other than the linear kind of progression, like just, I'm guessing what you mean by like melodical progression is like each time like da 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 da, and then da 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 da, like crescendo. Other than that, are there any other musical aspects that I'm kind of missing from the piece or could add to improve?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think everything we just talked about, I think, will help us be more raptured by your performance and be more connected to you, right? And so anything you do musically will have more meaning when we connect to you more in this way. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. But what I think the main, there was so many good things that you were doing. It's just such a hard piece to get us through in the way that it's meant to be understood, right? Because I think when I was watching you, I was too focused on how hard you were working, right? And you were working hard, and there's nothing wrong with that, except it distracted me from these longer sections of the piece and the whole effect of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why you connect here more. You play lower. You make this less about how hard it is and more about just how beautiful a piece it is and how much you're expressing through the way you're playing it.
Okay.
I hate the after I play a concert, I don't like I'll take any compliment, but the ones I like the least are the ones that are like man, you must be really good at like chopsticks. Right? How do you do that with your mallets? Like, oh my gosh, that is so incredible. And that's not a bad comment. It's just, but what about the music, right? You didn't say anything about the music and what it meant to you and what I was communicating or trying to communicate through it, right?
Yep.
Or, man, you look really crazy when you're jumping around back there. It's like, that's not what I want them to focus on. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other questions real quick before our time is up?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, great job overall.
Thank you.
Jonathan. And I hope I can hear you play again sometime.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, guys. And now we're going to switch over to Isaiah, who's our second place collegiate marimba competitor.
great.
And there,
Isaiah, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, Isaiah, just to pull up
Sure.
your info here. Oh,
and
yeah,
Isaiah's joining us from St. Joseph, Missouri.
great.
He goes to the same school that one of our number one multiple percussion winner is from the same.
Oh,
school.
great. Fantastic. I'm almost ready for you, Isaiah. You play character number 2. Yeah, great. All right. How are you today, Isaiah?
Good. How are you?
Good. Really enjoyed your performance. Yeah, it was fantastic. Let's see. Let me just catch up here real quick. Yeah. Okay. So, really great chops, as they say. Very good, fast playing, technical playing. It's very good. I think what I would continue to work on with you if we were working together, I mentioned something about the overall sound becoming a little thinner, and who knows? I mean, I was listening to, a recording, and it's hard to gauge the intricacies of tone quality sometimes, right? Just from that. But I think what I love about, so you're nailing this choppy kind of very clean part of playing. What I would love for you to explore is getting a little more expression through that, right? Your stroke is very, I know I keep using the word light. I don't think that's necessarily the best, but it's like a quick, very clean stroke, but it doesn't, in something that's a little more aggressive like this, it needs a little, the way I think about music anyway, it needs a little bit more kind of, right? A little bit more kind of bottom, sort of middle end, bottom end, more oomph to it, right? And I think as percussionists, this is something I talk a lot about. We've been taught for so long on other instruments primarily, and maybe even on the marimba too, to be very up, like lift. Everything's a lift, right? Get off of the instrument as fast as possible, right? And I understand that, even though there's nothing we can do physically to make that stick come off whatever it's striking, I don't care what it is, any faster than it just will do it by its own, right? And so while that gives us a good sound most of the time, it only gives us one sound, right? One kind of sound, right? So I think about the way other musicians are expressive, right? And they have literally countless ways of being expressive and making a sound, right? There's articulation, right? A ta versus a da articulation. So I hear ta with you all of the time, right? Every note is a ta for a whole piece with the way that you play, okay? And so I just want you to go and talk to a trumpet player friend of yours and tell that person, you can only play with a ta articulation today. That's it. What do you think they would say? Oh, you froze up on us. Did you hear that last question I had for you?
No,
Your
sorry, I
connection-
froze up.
Oh no, it's okay. So you play. Did you hear the part about you tend to play everything with a ta articulation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I heard
Okay.
that.
So if do you have a good trumpet brass player friend you can think of in your head? Okay, you're freezing. You're freezing on us
Oh, boy.
again.
Yeah. One of my roommates is a really good trumpet player.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so later I want you to go and tell him or her, whoever, whatever. Is this, you can only play with a ta articulation today. That's it. What do you think they would tell you?
Mm-hmm.
They probably think you're crazy.
Sorry,
right?
you keep freezing out every time. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. But the point is, we need to make more than one kind of sound.
You're good.
Right. So try and play a more like so. Let me just show you a little bit of how I think about this. So hopefully you can hear me okay. So if I want to play a da, or this is how you sound most of the time, right? You play very. Okay, very articulate, very quick strokes. Okay. And that's great. It sounds great. But what if I want to play something a little bit more? What if I don't want to always play right? What if I want to go do, 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 do? Then I can do this. As opposed to. Do you hear the difference between those two?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm doing a lot of different. I'm slowing for that second sound. I'm slowing the stroke down a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Getting less attack from the mallet, okay, which really allows for that sound to be softer. And now that also allows to hear more sound from the middle of the note when I'm not so aggressive on the attack, right? And I think you were using mallets that are those the gray Van Sices or the silver ones? Yeah. And so do you know what's inside those? Do you know what that core is?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like a hard center with a lot more yarn than like the gray ones. So like
yeah,
duotonal.
it is a hard center. Do you know if it's rubber or is it acrylic?
I don't know.
Okay, it's acrylic. Okay, so what that kind of core gets you is the ability to change color in a sound, right? Which is why he's got a set of rubber core mallets, right? And the rubber core gives you one kind of sound all the time, a darker fundamental sort of sound. The acrylic core mallet gives you a variety of sounds, actually. It can give you a good balance of that fundamental tone, but it can also brighten as we grip a little bit more and squeeze a little bit more and maybe make a faster stroke, right?
Yeah.
And I love that kind of a mallet. So you're using a stick that can actually change colors. Mine are designed similarly. So, and the reason I love that is because this is how most other musicians work. If they're playing a string instrument, they don't just use the same bow speed all the time, right? Or even the same bow pressure. They might dig in and go slower for a kind of sound, or dig in and go faster for a sound, right? They might play closer to the frog or whatever. I mean, there's countless things they do to make different colors. And I want you to do that too. I want you to explore that too, right? So instead of being so up all the time off the board, try leaning into it more, relaxing more, getting, I work a lot on trying to find power from something other than stick speed. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate something really quick here for you. Hopefully it will translate over Zoom. So I can play. You hear that okay? Is it too loud?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So here's just a normal, quicker, relaxed stroke. Listen to the sustain of that. Okay, now I'll do more of a weight stroke, more relaxed but weight stroke. Okay, now I'll put them back to back. 4-1 and then 4 the other. Do you hear a difference between those two?
Yeah, for sure.
Can you describe it to me?
In terms of articulation, the first one was more more strict, I guess, and the second
Yeah.
one definitely had more like, I don't want to say resonance, but it definitely had more warmth.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two aspects of the sound we're talking about, right? The beginning of the note, which is the attack. The first one was clearer, right? And quicker. The second one was opposite, hopefully, right?
Mhm.
It was there, but it was almost diminished, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sustain of the first one, I'm going through this really fast because I could teach 2 lessons on this, but the sustain on the first one is on the very first one is at its highest at the beginning, okay, and then dissipates. Where actually the sustain of the second one, the interesting thing, and I want to move on to some other things here, otherwise I could show you again, but the sustain of the second one actually grows a little,
Mm-hmm.
which is super interesting because in that one, I've separated the attack from the sustain. They're like 2 different things, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So develop other stroke types in your sound so you can use them to your expressive advantage, okay? I think is the point. Okay, great. Awesome. So in faster passages, you might try and grip. This is what this means. Like the information I left for you. In faster passages, you might try and do more of the first one, right? And then in more expressive, more open passages, you could do more of the second stroke there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Staying lower, we talked about that in the last session I did, playing as low as possible all the time, right? Not only will you hit more right notes, but you'll hit more correct spots on notes.
Mm-hmm.
Equalizing your timbre from note to note more, right? I always say there's 2 parts of accuracy, hitting the right note and then hitting the right spot on that note. That second part's super important, or way more important than I think most of us will admit, okay? And that will help your clarity, okay? Okay, good. Posture, hunched over a little bit. We want to see all of this as you play, right? So try and avoid too much of that, okay? The physical parts of playing the marimba are very unique to us, right? Nobody stands and has to move so far, so wide. So really start to paint, especially at the level of playing that you are at, okay? Okay, musicality. Yeah, I feel like again, this is the same kind of idea, right? It's just a little too kind in your interpretation. This is a really, there's lots of emotion here, right? Mm-hmm. So find ways to connect to that more. So it's a little bit more of a meaningful, sort of gutsy performance rather than just a kind of active, kind of lighter, performance. Okay. I already talked about the string player in here. Lower, more tense grip stroke. Yeah, so this is, okay. Sorry, just reading through this really quick. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about pacing, okay? Yeah, I think I feel like you just need to have a better idea where you're going on the long term, okay? Because you get somewhere really quick already in the first page, and then you've got all this music still to give us, and then nothing gets bigger than that, right? So this is a very important step. You're well more than prepared and ready to take it. So what I would love for you to do is create a big arc. Just get a big piece of paper or a blackboard or whiteboard or whatever. Just draw a big arc. Here's the beginning. Here's the end. Okay. Draw the next division down you can possibly find. Okay. Usually there's 2 sections to a piece, maybe 2 or 3 big sections. So if you're, if you've gotten more than that, you might need to reevaluate where you're going. But let's say I don't know this piece well enough to just do this off the top of my head, but let's say there's 3 sections, right? So this is this, we'll use the screen as the span. Okay. Here is 1, 2, 3. Okay. So this one's longer, right? And so I got to find a way to get to this point. And wherever, if there's a peak right before it, then I need to pace everything to that, right? And so on and so forth. And then this one might be really active, so I'll use an adjective. Super active. Next one, lyrical. Last one, active. Okay? And then look at each one of those and go down inside it for divisions. And then notate, here's the big moment in this whole first section right here. Okay? And go work it all the way down. Okay? Till you can't go any further with that kind of analysis. Okay. And now you know exactly where you're going on the phrase level, on the micro phrase level. You know, how much time should you spend on this comma in the score or this fermata? Well, now you know, right? Because I got to go here still, so I can't take too long, right? If there's a fermata after the first big arc, I can spend more time on that fermata, right? Because that's a major division point in the piece, okay? Now, all of a sudden, the micro phrasing becomes easy. Oh, I know where I need to go with this phrase now, right? I think what you're doing now is you're making your best phrasing decisions, but the chances of them actually working to help us feel this are practically zero, because you're not making them with any kind of, you don't have this in mind, right? So what great performers do is they have this ability to track themselves all along this arc. Not only on the micro level, but the next phrase level, the section level, and the whole piece level. They're operating on all those spheres in real time all the way through a piece, okay? And that's why a great performance is a great performance, because the listener says, I can see the whole arc of this thing. It's very clear, right? It's delivered in a way that makes sense, okay? So that's the next step for you, is just do that kind of analysis. Pace yourself to those big moments. Those adjectives we mentioned, active, find a way to encapsulate that physically and in your strokes, right? We talked about that, right? Here, all of that. So there's contrast in a piece, right? When we play everything with the same articulation for the whole piece, and the piece has actives and inactive moments in it, then we're treating all those sections as they're all active, when they're not, right? There's differences, right? Any questions on that before we close?
No, that's good.
Yeah, so that's what I mean here about macro elements of communication, musicality, right? And the authentic thing is more of just internalizing that physically in a way that sort of exudes. You know, I mentioned last class about my 6M concept, you know, make a musical motion that matches the musical moment, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions? Because I really just need to take a drink of water here real quick.
I've got one. I was just gonna say my biggest struggle with this piece wasn't anything really to do with chops or anything like that, but I really struggled because it's sort of etude-like and it's one tempo the entire way through. I struggled finding those moments where I can really be expressive and utilize, like, you know what I mean? Because it's very fast and it's just 16th notes for 5 minutes pretty much. And
Well, can I have another 30 seconds, Carol? Okay,
Sure.
we're going to take another 30 seconds here, okay? So I'm looking at the score right now. This whole opening section is rubato free, right? So there's more space you can take there, I think, right?
Yeah.
There's more expressivity there. There's so much drama here, right? Isaiah, like, ba-dum bum bum, ba-dum bum bum, ba-dum bum 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 bum. Roll, dum bum, right? Wait. Bum 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 bum. Are you really showing the groupings of these three notes?
Yeah.
Right? Bum digga 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 dum 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 bum 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 dum bum. Just even pacing the first 7 bars of this is tricky, right? Figure out a way to do that so by the time you get to the tempo of 8, we're ready for something new, right? That's just the introduction.
Yeah.
Right? So allow space there, allow that to go. And then just from, you just got to be careful to give yourself lots of room to grow. When you start the Fury section, and make sure it's very lyrical there. Like, you just need to turn this, anything that's lyrical, you need to make more lyrical, right? Marimba solos are all like this. There's so much of this. The real trick is making it this. All of these pieces have to become linear. Every possible thing you can think about to make it as linear as possible. Because there actually are really expressive moments I'm looking at in here, right? If I'm looking at, I know we're out of time, but like 23, 24, that's beautiful stuff. Right? This whole section is there's rolls, there's lots of lyrical stuff in there. You just got to find it and figure out a way to make sure it's played that way.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast, right? Aggressive opening to lyrical, and then you need more contrast in this. Then that problem goes away.
Yeah, for sure.
If you have any more questions, just email me. I'll help you some more.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, Isaiah, great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Isaiah. And now we're going to switch to David. David, I'm assuming you're in Rochester, New York.
I actually finished school last semester, so I'm currently out of school.
Gotcha.
What were you doing in Rochester? Just kidding. That's awesome.
I want to go there, yeah.
All right.
All right, David. Let me pull up your information here real quick. Thanks for your patience. All right. All right, David, I guess I want to start with a question for you, I think. If that's all right.
Sure.
What's the most interesting thing about this piece to you?
Bum bum ba-dum to me. I love hearing that. And it happens everywhere in the piece, and to me that's like one of the most just climactic moments where it's just that half step down. Bottom, bottom.
Yeah, good.
So I love that part about the piece.
Yeah, that's good. Anything even, that's a very specific thing, right? I love that too. I love that part about it. Is there anything more general, less specific?
More general?
Yeah.
I guess it would definitely be the characters. I mean, it's still centered around what I just sang, but it'd be the way that Vinyao uses that one little resolution and then brings all these different aspects to it. And I think one of the most fun things for me when working on the piece is, I mean, a lot of people freak out about the notes. I remember when I was in high school, my lesson teacher would be like, "Oh, this is the hardest piece like written for percussion or written for marimba." And I remember like when I was about to learn it, I was like, "Okay, I guess this is really hard." But I think the piece becomes a lot more real and a lot more fun when I think less about how hard the notes are and about how to bring music to this theme that's expressed in different characters. So I try to bring like an adjective or something to each variation, just to give it some more meaning other than these notes are hard.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, this helps me understand kind of where to go with this because, I would love to see more of the different characters in each of these variations come through your playing, if that makes sense. Because it's obvious, based on what you just said, you've thought about that, right? And this piece is full of, there's so much variety in each of these variations, right? To me, what's interesting about this piece too, and you sort of alluded to this a little bit, when we think of the mechanic compositional aspects, right, of Vinyao, it's not really interesting harmonically, in my opinion, right? There's not a lot of harmony going on here. It's primarily driven by rhythmic values, right? Combined with an amount of melodic ideas moving at different speeds on top of each other, right? And so the melodic idea here, so that's all very mechanical, right? And very specific. The reason people think this is hard is because, there's so much specificity, right, in the way that he writes rhythm in this score, in the way that things are constructed. Like rhythm takes up, what I love about this, and I think what we love about this piece is, and in Vinyao's music in general as percussionists, is this is all about rhythm, right? This is all about rhythmic value being really prominent in a piece of music, where harmony is actually taking kind of a backseat to it, right? Which is sort of the opposite of most classical music, right? And so we love that. But to me, what's fascinating about it, this piece, there's always a world music element part into the melodic part of Vinyao's music. In Burritt variations, right, it's like a samba kind of thing, right? In this piece, it's Khan and the style of that pop singing, right? And so if you really acknowledge that, which I think is kind of what you love about it, right? That whole bum bum piadum, right? These grace notes that we find are all these resolutions, these grace notes that you see in the piece are all representative of that more global style, actually, right? Which if you think about that dichotomy, right, of this global style melodic element of this piece combined with this very specific rhythmic compositional element of the piece, that doesn't really work, right? So to me, that's what's fascinating about all of Vinyau's music, is that he's combining these two things that really couldn't be more polar opposite. One very controlled, right? If you think of Khan singing, right, it's not bum 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 bum. It's not perfect, right? You couldn't even notate it in its realization. Does that make sense? So to me, what's hard about this music is, what am I supposed to do with that, right? How am I supposed to deal with that sort of rub, that dichotomy, that sort of clashing dichotomy? And I, as a performer, I love that, really thinking those types of things through. Okay, so I think most of my comments, if I remembered, for you, so technique is really good, tone quality is good, accuracy is very, very good. When I look at this score, right, we've got tenutos, we've got marcatos, maybe even double accents. There's a lot of articulation in this score, right? And so I think that's, I think that's really important in this music, because as these things are flying over and through everything, they're moving at different speeds. The reason why we can hear this theme moving at different tempos is because one has one articulation and the other has a different kind of articulation to it, right? It's that clarity. So I would love for you to find ways to be clearer with that, okay? And if you really love that resolution, I don't necessarily see that in the way that you play it, right? So in those grace notes, I think, is where we have the one little window into playing the style a little less clean, like he notates it. Bum, 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 bum. An inflection too of the idea, right? The expression of the idea. Yum, bum, dum, dum, dum. Dum, dum, bum, bum. We can still adhere to what he's doing rhythmically, but also take those opportunities and make a little bit more flair out of the sort of stylistic of the con aspect of things. Okay.
Sure. Could I give it a try?
Sure. Yeah. And while you're walking to the marimba, can you show me where variation 1 starts?
Yeah. I remember seeing that comment of yours. Yeah. I'll give that a shot.
Because no one knows I don't think anybody really realizes how short this theme really is, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it keeps going.
Right, exactly. But it doesn't, right? That's your first opportunity as a performer to say, this is a theme in variations, and here's where the first theme starts, right? Yeah. So try it from the top. Give me a little more stylization if you can. And then find a way to show me where variation 1 starts.
Sure. Can you see me okay and hear this okay?
I don't see you at all. I see the marimba.
Oh, you just see the marimba. Okay. Can you hear the marimba?
Yes. Do you have a different marimba in there? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. How's this? Can you see anything?
All I see is a marimba and a piano behind it.
Marimba, okay. Do you see my hand at all?
Yes, I can see your hand now.
Okay, great. Okay, there we go.
There, now we're talking. Okay, good, great. Yeah, you're delayed on my screen, but I think I could hear it, so I wasn't able to watch you do that, but I heard most of it. I could hear it, and that's much better. I can definitely hear. I think you need to breathe there or do something to show where variation 1 is. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. And then we talked about the transitions, right? In each of these, or I mentioned that in my comments for you. And that's the other thing, is we want to really show the audience somehow physically where these transitions start, right? Because that's like transitions for me are really important as an interpretive musician, as I'm communicating form to the audience. We know of transitions from theory class, right? We know of them, but they're not really, I think they're just not talked about from a theory perspective as being very important, but they're actually really important from a performer's perspective. So when those transitions are, well, first of all, we have to identify them, right? The second thing is communicating like you just did there, showing us where the beginning of variation 1 is showing us where those transitions start, right? And if we can get a sense of that as a listener, then I know something's about to change. And then I'm like waiting for it. And then bam, you give it to me with the next variation start, right? And so maybe we pause briefly before it, not very much, or we do something with our motion here that says we're done, right? Or, that repeated idea that echoes is something he uses in a lot of these transitions. So maybe there's some consistency in the way that we approach those that an audience can sort of catch on. And a lot of those are inactive, right? Or they're less active than the variation that happened before. So physically, I'm showing less movement, right? I'm settled more physically. These are all ways that we can help communicate a different kind of parts of the music to the listener. Okay, so find a way to be a little clearer about where that is. You're so clean, you've memorized this so well, and your accuracy is great. The expressive parts, the getting me through this really long piece is where your next steps are, right? And so it sounds like you've made some of these decisions already. It's just a matter of getting a better sense of what do I need to do physically to get this idea across? Because sometimes it feels like we're doing a lot behind the instrument, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's coming across. So try and get some feedback, right, from somebody else, or maybe video yourself and send it to some other friends or musicians that you trust, or and then to get some feedback on whether those things are coming across or not. Any questions while we're at this point? Okay, let me see what else we've got to get to here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the variation within, so each of these variations has a character to it, right? So I think I don't know what the numbers are, but 3 or 4, somewhere in the middle there, right? There's really expansive. Bum, 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 bum. So try and do more physically, visually to show that, okay? So it's similar to this idea of like interpreting and helping us get through each, point where there's transitions. It's like the character of this variation is linear. I think of like vastness sometimes in that particular variation, right? It's like I've walked into this desert where there's just nothing, right, when I get there. So those kinds of visuals sometimes really help me sort of figure out, like, that's why I love using adjectives. Like, what is a good adjective for each of these variations? That one might be desolate. I like that, right? What would it mean to create a desolate atmosphere here, right? So if that's true, then I'm going to be using very fluid bum, 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 right? Motions. Bum, 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 bum. And then again, the lyricism there was also important, right? Bum, 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 right? And then bum, back, and then all of a sudden things are more active. Bum, doom, ding, 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 ding. Just trying to do as much there as possible to show contrast within a piece within these variations. So I have more variation to hear as I'm listening to you play it, right? And I think you're doing a really good job of playing that sort of linear quality, but I don't see it always here and in your motions. And that's the important part, I think, from a listener, is when I see it and I hear it, then I'm like there with you, right? If I just hear it, I might get there with you. But when you think of any great musician, that interpretive musician, any style of music, their whole body's in it, right? Their whole body is in symbionts with what they're doing in their sound, right? The way they're making sound. It's like all connected. So continue working with that. All right. Let's see. What else we got? Yeah, and I mentioned something about you're being a little too kind on the more aggressive parts of the piece. Yeah, I think you could embrace being a little bit more physically. I don't know. It's hard to explain this clearly here, but it just like the ending, right, needs to be this really big. Have you seen Svet Stoyanov play this?
Yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah, I love his performance of this, and I remember the live one he did at PASIC several years ago, and he really, all these things we've been talking about the con parts of this, the global music part of this, like the expression and how much he really got into that. I think, to me, that was what I loved about the way that he plays the piece. Mm-hmm. So maybe go back and rewatch that, and now that we've had this discussion, and really think about, like, and you don't have to play it like Svet. I'm not saying play this like Svet, right? But like, what aspect of that part of his performance, what does it mean, right? What does it bring to the piece? Where we started with this dichotomy, right, between these two things that really don't mix. Like in his performance, I felt like we saw both of those things really, really well. And that's what art is, right? That's what great performance is. It's like bringing life. I mean, when we think about music on a page, right, where it's just so incomplete. It's not like a visual painting. I don't have any art where you can see it in my screen. But a visual painting, yeah, it means something different to you and me, but it's done, right? A piece of music is just totally incomplete without our investment in it and the performer's role, right? And so you're doing a great job of showing us what the composer wrote down, but I just need to hear more about how you think this is supposed to go and what you think, what you love about it, right? The kind of quality you want to bring to it. Okay, so that part of the aggressive side of things, I think, that might be just to watch that Svet's performance might be a good way to sort of study that a little bit. All right. I think that's pretty much everything I've got. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess one thing that I definitely noticed about Svet's recording were everything that you talked about with his style of playing and kind of doing things with time. And definitely coming up to the recording date for what I sent in, I was like struggling with, okay, how much should I do and how much can I do? Because there were definitely some moments in his recording where I was like, I think that might be too much because I can no longer feel the time. Because, so it's like, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with like the folk aspect that you can't write down and what is written. And I think Svet's more on this side, and I'm a little bit more on this side.
I think that's great. And so you need to just continue that. You're asking all the right questions there, right? Like, which is, how do I think this should be, right? And so, it's up to you. You're a level artist, definitely, that these are the exact questions that you need to start asking. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different question of, do I want to win this competition and play it like you think best chances of that would be, right? Okay. And I get that. Svet has the reputation, and he can just do whatever he wants, and this is how he wants to do it, right? And you're not there yet, but you're on your way there, right? And so you want to think about that. I think very differently about mallet choice for this music than everybody, right? I haven't talked about that, but to me, I see, when we got so many voices going on in this music, why are we using rubber ball mallets? It makes no sense to me, because it's the only option I've got to delineate between these voices is volume, right? If I have a harder chord mallet, I can play brighter on this line. as opposed to this line, right? When I think about, you know, other musicians, if they had to play something like this, they would use tone color all the time. I mean, other instrumentalists use tone color constantly in their playing, right? But if I use a rubber balled mallet, I have zero control over tone color. Don't you think that would be valuable in this kind of music? I do, but I'm the only one on the planet that thinks like this in regards to Vinyau's music. I'm the only one. Okay, so anyway, I only say that because you want to. I tell all of my students that I want them to think about what's really important to them, what mallets they want to play with. I would love for them to play my mallets, but not if they don't think it works for the way that they want to sound. You know what I mean? So you're at that point where you can find a better balance. I think I'm just encouraging you to be a little more, to try and just continue to find a more convincing way of, because when I watched you, I said what I said, right? Because I wasn't convinced that this is how you think about these things. So whatever it is that you decide on that spectrum, it just needs to come across more clearly. Does that make sense? Because if it did, then I would be saying, I wouldn't have these questions for you, right? I wouldn't have those comments. So I think you're just still kind of searching for how you want and how you think about these things. And if you know what that is, great. If you don't, figure that out. And the next step, once you figure that out, is how do I make this clear in my performance? Yep.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, you got it. Thank you so much, David. Great playing. I really enjoyed it. I hope I get to hear you play again.